Timothy Joe Bratton Sr. and my beautiful, lovely wife, Veronica
Taylor,
my sweetheart. The name of our ministry, his ministry, is Crack Clay. Building an affair-proof marriage God's way. You want to start off with that?
Okay, so I'm going to start off with a really good example that was used in the book about the fourth need, which is her fourth need, which is financial support.
This is her.
His needs, her needs, my fourth need. So, he talks about he sometimes he does marriage premarital conferences, and he'll ask the audience of young couples, this is before they marry, if just before your marriage your spouse announced that you should not expect him or her to ever earn a dime during the marriage, would you continue to tie the knot?
And we're going to find out about that just in a second. Before we do, we got to talk a little bit about socialism. Socialism and
Communism.
And sex outside of marriage. But in socialism, guys, we even heard today, the Socialist National Party of Germany, otherwise known as Nazism. Hitler appealed to so many people. You can see pictures of people raising their hand. Oh, Hitler! He was so popular, ladies and gentlemen, that he actually got voted in. People went to the polls and voted in Hitler. How did he get in? Lies, lies, and lies. If you Google Cuba right now, if you Google on the map, and just see what Cuba's like, you'll see colorful images. This place ain't half bad. Now, if you go to my Facebook and see these 4 guys who escaped into Cuba to find out what it's really like, unbelievable. The lies of the Nazi, communism, socialism, that's their base. That's all they rely on is lies, lies, and more lies. You lie enough, Stalin and Hitler said, people will begin to believe you.
Well, look at our media.
Communism. The devil is all behind Hitler, Nazism, and communism. And Marxism. He's all behind it. That's his religion. To stifle away anything to do with Christianity. And it's a closed society. Once it becomes communism, you can't get into it. It's a prison. They can't leave and you can't get in. I remember when I was a kid, these people who come to our church who smuggled Bibles into communist countries. They would carry suitcases in all kinds of ways to get Bibles into the Christians inside the Soviet Union or the Iron Curtain. Why was it called the Iron Curtain? Because you couldn't get in, they couldn't get out. It was a prison. That's what the communists and the Nazis are offering people. And they're gullible enough to say, yeah, it's cool, man. Read the facts, guys. I just had to say it. It's in prison. You can't get into North Korea. You can't get into communist countries. They won't let you because it's evil.
Okay.
I got one more question. My wife's going to talk about this. As a born-again Christian, I got to read this here. This Hebrews 13:4. 13:4. Marriage is to be held in honor among all, and the marriage bed is to be undefiled. For fornicators and adulterers, God will judge. I've only got one question. How can someone living in sexual sin day in and day out expect their prayers to be answered? It says all over the Bible that Jesus hears and answers the prayer of a righteous person. First, you got to give your life to Jesus. And then as you give your life to Jesus, you got to utilize the Holy Spirit who's inside of you to help you, to give you the supernatural power to say no to the devil who's out to seek and destroy your marriage. And for us to so lightly live in sin, sexual sin, day in and day out, and then expect God to give us what we want by praying to him. It doesn't work that way. What is the wall of sin between you and that relationship with Jesus? I'm going to end with this, just this little thing. The devil wants us to go see those 17 R-rated movies. He loves it. He loves those sex-filled images.
We're not talking about Passion of the Christ.
No, we're not talking about 1917 and all that. He wants those sex images in the back of your mind to think about it. Because he wants to get control of your mind. He does it so subtly, those images. And we start thinking, well, it's fine. The world does it. What a contrast between the world ways right now and God's ways. There's two ways to heaven, guys. God's way, which is the only way. And the only other way, there's only two ways. There's two roads after we die. There's God's way and the world's way, which is devil's way.
Which is not heaven.
Two
There's
roads.
one way to heaven.
There's no two roads. One way to heaven is through Jesus. But there's an alternative.
Right.
And that's the world's way, which leads to destruction. Thank goodness I'm on my way to heaven. I want you all to come to heaven with me. Because I love you. More importantly than that, Jesus is in love with you. And I think revival is coming soon. Here's why. Because people are seeing the contrast between Jesus and the devil. This world is demonic. You want that? Do you want to be here for that? I don't. There's two ways. God's way or man's way, which is the devil's way. So, honey, answer that question, sweetheart.
Well, I just want to answer Elizabeth for a minute. First of all, thank you, Elizabeth, for the encouragement. I read the first one, and then this one, I get you, because she said she used to be that stupid and think you could just sleep around and still have God answer your prayers. Right. And then sometimes what happens in that, the answers we think we're getting lead us to the wrong person, right? It's not to the person that God had for us, because we were separated from him in that prayer because we were in that sexual sin. So I am with you, sister. I totally get what you're saying.
We love you, sister.
And we do.
Your encouragement.
And we love you. Okay, so do women marry men for money?
No.
Well, there's always all those
Don't
jokes
say that.
about that, right? Mm-hmm. There's always these jokes about how, she just married him for his money, right? But as humorous as it may be, William Harley, I always want to call him Hurley, William Harley Jr., talks about how there is some truth to that. Because usually there is...
Well, to answer that question, what was that first you start out with?
Oh, yeah. So when I talked about the example where he asked couples before they're married, if your spouse-to-be were to tell you before the marriage that they never intend to earn a penny during the marriage, would you continue and marry them? And almost all men's hands go up that they would still continue with the wedding if their wife chose to stay home and not work.
How many women's hands went up?
Hardly a single woman.
Not really?
Hardly a single woman. Hardly a single woman's hand joins them, because most women expect their husbands to earn a living. It's just a fact. And that is an emotional support. That is emotional need for women. And that's one of the women's top 5 emotional needs. And we were talking about where this really ranks with me. This is really pretty, I guess 5 needs. I guess all 5 would be high up, right? Because there's only 5 of them and versus all the needs you could possibly have. But this is a big one for me. And I don't expect my husband, I expect to be a partner to him, right? We're partners. I expect him.
In our business, yeah.
Yeah, we're partners in our business. But he is definitely the main one. And I appreciate that.
I kind of look at it as the president and vice president.
I appreciate that about our marriage and our business. And ironically, too, we bought the business 1 year ago today. How about that?
So we're celebrating,
baby. Okay. So, just a little free one for you. Anyway, so she talks, he opens with a story, and I've heard this story so many times, and I've known women who are doing this, that they marry somebody, and the husband, he's so sweet and kind, but, like this particular story he used, the husband's an artist, and they met in college, and he couldn't get a job in graphic design, so he's working some small, menial, jobs part-time, and trying to do his art. But when he's doing his art, he's not, so she's having to work because she has to help support because he's not doing it, and she wants to have children, and so she's working full time as a receptionist in a law firm, I think, or somewhere. It doesn't matter where she's working. Anyway, so when she's working, one of the partners, then she helps one of the partners out who's a young single man, and he dresses really nice, and they start to connect, and then the next thing he's like, well, I don't think your husband's being really fair to you because, he gets to sit at home and enjoy his art while you work to support the two of you. And she's already expressed she's heartbroken because she doesn't think they're ever going to be able to buy a house and have children because they're never going to be able to afford it because he makes so little. So the next thing you know, they're having an affair, right? So it's an emotional need. Financial support is an emotional need for most women. Again, in today's society, I have met a lot of women whose husbands stay home and they're okay with it. They're okay with it.
So it's your choice, you're saying?
It's their, but that's it. But it's their choice. So that the woman needs to be able to have the choice. And in the marriage, if he chooses for her by forcing her, then that's where the resentment builds up. So there's nothing wrong. We're not saying at all there's not anything wrong with a woman working, and women have great jobs and work hard. And some women
more force than men. There's probably more women in the workforce now.
Well, I think he says that there is in the book that now that there's more. Actually, whenever the year I read the book, there were more women in the workforce than men, and in higher positions. Like he's a psychologist, right? But the bottom line is she needs to have the choice. She shouldn't be forced into working because he fails to do his part. And God created men with that sense that we talked about in Love and Respect, and other books that we've read through and walked you through too, about how God created men to be protectors and providers. That's one of the key ones. So it kind of makes sense that if he created man to be a provider, he created woman to have that need.
Right. That's the last book you read.
Yeah, Love and Respect was. Yeah, to have that need. So of wanting him to do that. That's the way he created us so that we would work together. So a lot of times women want to be home in their early years of their children's lives and go back out later and work once their kids are older or in school, and that's fine, whatever they choose. But then what happens is he has to make enough money. If she chooses to be at home, or even if Harley recommends, even if sometimes there's still resentment, and then if you go and make a budget in your home and you see that he's seen where they've made budgets and that the husband's income is actually paying for all the needs of the house, the mortgage, the utilities, car insurance, that kind of thing, but the her paychecks are just used for like the extras, then that gives her a greater respect for her husband if this is one of her needs, right? So many times women are just so beaten down and unhappy because they really make this commitment to this marriage, and then they find themselves so upset because of his inability to provide even the basics for her family. And we women are like mama bears, especially when children are involved, and we want to make sure our children have. So if a husband's job is truly insufficient to pay for the necessities, then he should try to improve his job skills. And women will not typically mind like agreeing to go back to work for 2 years while he goes to community college or do something. So it's an example of 2 years while he goes to community college, but to go back to work temporarily to help out while he does something to increase his job skills. So that he can increase the income and the revenue into the family. But what happens so many times, and we're not talking about the lifestyle that they have to have the boat and the really big, 6,000 square foot house, and he doesn't have that ability to meet that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the basic needs, and then how creating a budget is so important for your home, and trying to live within that to see what exactly he needs to make. So if he needs to work extra jobs, or if there's any places that can be cut back. And he does talk about how some women come in for therapy and they're so upset because they're not going to be able to quit their jobs when they have their kids, but they yet are not willing to downsize to a smaller house. And they're not willing to give up the, $50,000 cars, the two of them, each $50,000 piece. So that's a lifestyle choice, is what I want to say about that. And that's what he says. That's a lifestyle choice. So you need to decide then in those cases what your priority is. Is your priority keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, or is your priority being home with the kids, and is there a way to cut back in your home?
So communication's everything.
So communicate. So the big thing about this,
what do you like?
Is being a partner and communicating. And just like we talked about when we talked about communication,
He's our boss.
When we talked about communication, how we talked about how if that doesn't happen, you can't fill any of the other needs, because this is huge. You have to communicate with each other. You have to, and I just have to say, it's so important. Right. Husbands, let me tell you, from personal experience, people that I know, if your wife is resentful because she is working multiple jobs and she wants to be a stay-at-home mom and you are not doing your part, or she just wants a better life than y'all are having because you're not doing your part, instead of talking down to her when she expresses that to you, try to understand where she's coming from. Instead of putting her down, not being willing to listen to her, then please take her seriously. Because if not, you're going to end up in the situation like this in the book, right? And that couple that we talked about, that was at the beginning of the chapter, about the artist and the wife who was working and ended up having an affair with the partner, she ended up leaving her husband and marrying the partner. And we don't know how that ended up. We don't know how that marriage ended up, but we know that financial support need was there. Anyway, so it's kind of funny for me that we end up talking about this today. And because it's been such a hot topic, and I just want to close with this. It's been such a hot topic, really. And a lot of people read my stories last weekend, before the 4th, about my frustration. And I've talked before, and I really try to find a way to just be the light of Jesus in whatever I say, but find the balance between the truth and the grace. Yeah, the sermon today was for James 3, about your tongue and using your tongue.
Wisely.
And still portraying Jesus when you are talking to people. But we do know as Christians, we are still called to speak out, but just to do it with some grace. And this financial thing is such a huge thing for me personally that it could probably be in my top 2, right? But because of how I grew up. Because I grew up, as I've said before, in case you haven't heard it, I grew up as a divorced mom my parents divorced when I was 3, and Native American, and she was 8th grade education, so she worked in factories, and she did the best she could, and she worked 2 jobs. Most of my life, most of the time she worked 2 jobs. And so I went to school during the day and babysitter at night until I was old enough to stay at home alone at night in a 1-bedroom apartment in a really bad neighborhood. And I had to sleep in the same bed with my mother growing up because we had a 1-bedroom apartment. So and then when I got out on my own, so I went to work. So I chose, I was majoring in theater at VCU. I always wanted to be an actress, but so I chose to go in the way of financial security and to go work full-time, because I had started a part-time job at Signet Bank, and I chose to go full-time there because I wanted that financial security. So now at 50, almost 51, looking back, I can see how, since I've been on my own, that financial security has driven many of my decisions. And so instead of pursuing my dreams to be an actress, I pursued financial security and banking. And I have worked hard, and when there were times in my life through my first marriage and raising our children, and when that I've had to work 2 or 3 jobs. I worked 2 or 3 jobs. So I get really, really triggered with entitlements. Really triggered about entitlements.
Takes a lot of withdrawals from the love bank, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, and the love bank, our society. So that's why I am so vehemently opposed to any socialism or Marxism, because I know America is the country where anything is possible the way that I grew up, because I grew up with nothing. And I have worked hard. And you know what my mother taught me? She had nothing. She worked hard just to put food on the table and to give us that 1-bedroom apartment. She worked 2 jobs because she had an 8th grade education, but she didn't complain about it. She got up and she went to work every day, 2 jobs. And that's what she role modeled for me. So I work hard. I hustle. And that you can too. And anyone can. Anyone can take themselves out of any situation. You cannot blame the circumstances you were born into. You cannot blame your skin color. You cannot blame your neighborhood, your parents. You cannot blame your parents for what choices you make as a grown-up. All right? You decide whether you're going to be a victim or whether you're going to be a victor. So you can either pull yourself up by your bootstraps and make something of your life, or you can just choose to wallow in victimhood.
Amen.
And I don't believe in victimhood.
Amen.
So
that's why it's so important. The poor revolutionists, the one reason why socialist countries, after they become socialism, are locked down, you can't get in. One of the biggest reasons is this is huge. These comrades, these ATF and people were fighting for this socialist country. When it finally became socialist, they says, now we're going to get what we deserve. And their boss says, you were a traitor to your own country. How could you expect us to trust you now? You are a revolutionist. Perhaps you might revolt against our system. But you said, sir, we sent you to death immediately.
Oh, yeah.
That's why after these socialist countries take over, they lock the door.
I mean, you hear about missionaries.
These people who were in there and fought for communism, Marxism, socialism are dead. Mm-hmm. They line them up against the wall and shoot them all. That's why I'm homesick. When I gave my life to Jesus, I'm homesick. If this isn't my world, this isn't my home. Jesus is in heaven.
Okay.
And I don't want to stand, I'm going to close with this. I don't want to stand in front of Jesus and think of all the opportunities I had down here, just like him right now, to tell my friends about Jesus. Because that's the most important thing. It's the answer. We love you guys.
Okay, one more thing. And a lot of times when we talk when we say that we are not in favor of entitlements and
right.
We think that, like I think people pulling down statues maybe should have some jobs, call me crazy, and maybe they wouldn't be out destroying things. So when we talk about that, when we express our views, people, the first thing they come at me with is, well, you're supposed to be Christians. You don't want to help people? Well, yeah, I do.
Yeah, we help people.
We help people. Amen. We do. And because I grew up like I did, I'm the first one to help people. Mm-hmm. We are the first ones to help people.
Thank you, Jesus.
So
nothing to do with us.
It's not about us. It's about Jesus. But the point of that is we do want to help people, but yes, that Jesus provides so that we can. We have a heart for helping people because of that, but that we believe that that it is biblical that the church, that in the Bible, and when Jesus is talking about doing for the poor and the widows, he's talking to the church. He's not talking about the government doing for them. He's talking about the church doing for them. And I want to give my money, we want to give our money to people that we know are in need. And we want to make sure it's being used correctly because we're giving it to people we know who are in need. We're giving it to organizations that are aligned with our values. And we're not giving it to the government to decide who gets it. We're deciding who gets it.
The Bible does not say God helps us out. That's not in the Bible. God said help the poor. Give to the poor.
But that's the church, not the government.
That's the church. We love you guys. See you next week. We love you. Jesus loves you more importantly. Live for Jesus, not this world. There's no hope in this world. The only hope is in Jesus. Bye.
Have a great week.
Have a great week. See you next week.